Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour on the road. I'm wearing my Pappas shirt, world famous crab cakes. They have their golf tournament next week, next Monday, by the way. This week I did the Mount Washington Pediatric a golf tournament on Monday with Leonard Raskin and Raskin Global. Pappas doing their golf tournament next week, so big tidings to Tim and everybody at Pappas for doing that. We're going to be on the 25th at Pappas this month. I probably won't have the Pac-Mans, even though I actually saw Mr. Costas open the lottery machine and put the tickets in. Never seen that before. I saw people buying the Pac-Man scratch-offs at Costas on Sunday night as well. We'll be at Costas on the 20th. We're going to be at Pappas on the 25th. We will have scratch-offs. I think I'm going to have the lucky sevens to do that. So harkens back to my Tony Manero 7-7 Saturday Night Fever thing. If you know, you know. Luke's like, I don't know what he's talking about. He's gone Dennis Miller on me. It's all brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions and keeping our water fresh and Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. And I want to shout out our friends at Royal Farms because Chicken Palooza's around the corner, and I'm trying to get in line to get a shirt that fits real good this year and some chicken and some Western fries. And by the way, Max Weiss is coming on this week, and she doesn't like Western fries. You know what she's talking about. Cole Roofing and our friends at Gordian Energy for putting us out on the road. Bill Cole and I had a spicy chat last week about media access and all sorts of things. Luke's with us now, the baseball team. Like this is so much fun because there's a whole like nerd walk thing you and I did. And I did the screenshots for some of the looks you gave me at Fadley's on Friday. You have these looks of wonderment, joy, cheer, fear, astonishment, disgust. Like you make the greatest faces after you were served a Fadley's crab cake on the set. But we do this a lot lately. We're doing a lot of radio. You're getting out of bed early. You're down there late. I don't have a credential. You have to work both beats next week. That's a big issue. And that will be addressed. Not in the here and now, but that will be addressed. Trust me. Anybody knows me knows that's going to get addressed. But all that being said, we have so much fun talking about the team, and a lot of times we're bitching about the team, whether it's Kimbrel in the bullpen, and Lord knows, had we done radio 2 hours after we did radio on Friday, we would have been whistling a different tune with John Means and the Wells situation. Just kind of a bloody Friday, quite frankly, that you attended, and Mike Elias with a rather somber, dugout speech while this team expects to win the World Series, but dude, we get together. We're doing a lot of radio. They win two, they lose one. And whether you and I get together after they've lost one or won one, usually it's like, it's like the turkey on thing. Wait, what's the temperature? They lose a little bit. Even when they got swept by the Cardinals, it's not like you and I are jumping off the cliff because we've been at this a while and we know how good the team is. But there is the point where, like, they're taking on some hits. If I'm writing Orange Crush 1 and they win a World Series, it won't be without being a little bit of a roller coaster because this ain't coming easy.
There's no question about it. And you made mention of the St. Louis series. And what really struck me, Nestor, on Sunday after, let's face it, and we'll get into this game specifically, but the Orioles let one get away on Sunday. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they haven't done that often when you're talking about a team that's on pace to win, 105 games at this point in time, but they let one go. In contrast, the Yankees out in San Francisco stole one in the ninth inning and ended up winning. You mentioned the St. Louis series, though, and that was the first time, of course, that they've been swept in the regular season in 2 years and the streak and all that talk. But the Orioles have won eight of 10 since then, and they've gained no ground on the New York Yankees in those 10 games. When you go 8-2 and you're still 3 games back, and I know you and I talked a little bit about the division race, I still think you're a little more in the minority as far as downplaying that. I think if you see Orioles fans talking about it on Twitter, there's lots of discourse about the division race. We know it's June. We know there's a long way to go, but it just
I'll be more interested in talking about when we play each other 2 weeks from now, right?
Sure. No doubt about it. But my point is, here you have a weekend where the Orioles win 2 out of 3, and it felt like kind of a frustrating weekend with how it finished. And because at the outset, it was the news about John Means and Tyler Wells. So it kind of felt like a frustrating weekend from that standpoint. And I don't say that to to knock the team or to be overly negative, anything like that. It's just
Well, the team took a hit over the weekend. It took a couple of hits over the
sure,
weekend. Yeah.
sure. So that's where it's frustrating because they've played really well since being swept in St. Louis, to your point, and they've won 8 of 10, and they're still looking up at the Yankees and they're 3 games back, albeit only 1 game back in the loss column. So, nothing to panic over. But I think what we saw Sunday, and we've talked about this, but we'll continue to talk about it because they have one more off day until July 1st. They have one off day in the month of June. I think Sunday was a reflection of being in the midst of that stretch. Saturday, Kyle Bradish gets knocked out early. And we can talk about that, but just the impact of that. Bullpen worked pretty heavily on Saturday. Sunday, Corvin pitched well, but I think compared to previous starts, probably had a longer leash in that game. Gives up the home run in the 7th inning, I guess it was, but pitched well, but asked probably to pitch a little bit deeper into the game. And then Brandon Hyde gave Dylan Tate a much longer leash as a result of the guys that worked on Saturday. So I think Tate had too long a leash. I would have gone to Danny Coulomb probably a couple batters earlier than Hyde did, but he was playing the matchups of righty and all that, even though Danny Coulomb, when he's right, gets right-handers out at a very fair clip. But I think you saw a game where they had to stretch a little bit more with their pitching on Sunday than they normally would like to. But this is the reality now because you're going to Toronto. There's no off day. You're going down to the Trop after that, and I mean this is quite a stretch for them. And we're going to continue to talk about the potential for maybe a 6-man rotation. But now it's a matter of, okay, if you're going to have a 6-man rotation, who's going to be in it? Are you calling up Cade Povich? I mean, Dean Kramer's probably still a couple weeks away, although it was a positive update on him on Friday when Mike Elias spoke. So, it's just there's a lot going on right now, and they continue to win. They took 2 out of 3. Let's be clear about that. Not being overly negative about that. You can't expect to sweep every series by any means, but in contrast, the Yankees keep winning, and then the news over the weekend coming out of Yankees, the Yankees world is Garrett Cole's. His debut is, imminent. So it very much is a case of, boy, they've got to keep winning because the Yankees won't stop winning. The Yankees are losing very few games. So it just speaks to what kind of race this is when you're playing 650 ball and you're 3 games out. So doesn't mean you obsess over that. Keep winning. Keep handling your business, keep winning series, and good things will happen in the big picture. But, we saw this last year with the Rays. It was a tight race throughout, even though the Orioles were a 101-win team. And it's feeling like they might need to be even better than that to win the division this year. And just speaks to how competitive it's been. But, you take 2 out of 3 from the Rays. You'd like to feel really good about it. But the weekend ended in a disappointing way, just knowing that they let one get away. And then in contrast, the Yankees stole one in the 9th inning out in San Francisco and end up gaining a game in the standings.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on the Twitter and the IG and the threads. And I'm trying to figure all that stuff out here this summer. We've just launched a brand new website. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. Big thanks to Jessica Vallis from Hartford Design. She's going to be joining us out on the Crab Cake Tour. I'm booking Crab Cake Tour dates all summer long. We're trying to have some fun around here. The Orioles have certainly made it a daily going effort. And for Luke, who goes down to the ballpark 6-7 days a week when they're in town, the Ravens allowing him in a couple of times this week. Next week, it's mandatory. They'll all be there. We're going to be talking plenty of sports around here, as well as I had Bill Henry on from the controller's office in Baltimore City. We talked about invasive blue catfish while I ate some invasive blue catfish before I eat some snakehead a little later on. But the baseball heartbeat of all of this and where the team is and the level of expectation and the disappointment of a Friday afternoon where by the time you got to Fadley's with me on Friday, and we did a really cool segment on walks, like real nerdy baseball stuff, that if you go back to the roots of me doing this in 1992, 3, 4, before there was a football team here, it's the kind of stuff we really would talk about in regard to building a roster around Roberto Alomar and a ballpark around Mike Messina. And these guys are like scientists and people like you that cover it. And when I watch Major League Baseball Network now, the more that I learn about where they're going with all of this. This Tommy John thing and injuries and Means having it once, needing it again, and Bautista being out. And I don't want to say it out loud, but we're on borrowed time with Bradish, right? I mean, like, we are based on where we were. And this is sort of an epidemic thing, right? I mean, this is a real problem. And I see this, and whatever the sports science they're doing and the health they're doing. And look, my dad coached Little League sort of famously. If you saw the 25th anniversary documentary brought to you by Curio Wellness and Foreign Daughter, my dad, when I was a kid, like 1978, you don't throw a curveball. We don't let you, you'll throw your arm out. I learned that phrase when I was 9 years old, 1977. And then, like, there was a guy named Tommy John. Like, I saw Tommy John pitch several times at the end of his career when he had nothing. I saw him pitch with the Yankees, the whole deal. I remember with the Dodgers. So, and I've been up on this. I've been in journalism 40 years and around pitchers, around guys that blow their arms out, elbows out, all of that stuff. But like, in the football parlance, and you cover football and you'll go out there next week and they're all trying to keep everybody healthy. I mean, a couple years ago, where Harbaugh, the last time I spoke to Harbaugh at the pool, and all he was doing was talking about all the injuries they had and all the injuries they had, and everybody was indicting his trainer and what's going on, or the field, or how the way they're practicing or training in some way. This pitching thing, when you're having press conference in the middle of the season, two guys have blown arms out, and we're like, next body, come on in. You know what I mean? Like, this is an issue for baseball.
Yeah, no question about it. And let's be clear. I mean, it's been trending this way for a while. That's where when you hear the Players Association talk and they talk about the pitch timer, and I'm not dismissing that being a variable because you are talking about pitchers with less recovery time in between pitches, but it's one variable. It's not the only one because this isn't a 2-year problem. This is something that has been trending this way more and more the last 10, if not 15 years. I mean, it truly is an arms race, Nestor, because this is a different kind of problem than, say, the shift, right? Or time of game, and you have a pitch clock that speeds things up. What is ultimately hurting these pitchers is also what's getting them to this position, what's getting them to the point where they're in the major leagues and having success, being drafted, making money, doing well in arbitration, getting a lucrative long-term contract. Velocity and spin. I mean, you've heard me, how many times have you heard me say that over the last, let's say, 5 years? A lot, right? Because that's what we see. And it's not just a Tommy John epidemic. And just to clarify, we don't know if John Means and Tyler Wells are having Tommy John surgery per se. They are having UCL revision, which could be another Tommy John surgery. It could be that the internal brace procedure, which is something, they actually repair the UCL. Point is, it's a major operation. Point is, it takes them out until next year. So obviously,
and
it's a big
point is,
deal.
it was a work-related injury.
Sure.
Yeah,
So, I think on a very simplistic level, like we all lament for the days of, even though, let's be very clear, pitchers have always blown out their arms. Pitchers have always blown out their elbows. You can go back and find examples in the 60s and 70s, and people will say, well, Jim Palmer threw this many innings and these many complete
I got
games.
A book on Steve Delkowski.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But there's no disputing the frequency increasing. And I think what's scariest about this, and I think what makes this so complicated, is this is truly a systemic issue that goes back, and you made reference to being in Little League at age 9. I don't think so much maybe 9-year-olds having Tommy John surgery, but you'll find 12 and 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds.
Sick.
Yeah. So, but this is the problem, because this is a fundamental systemic issue that's going all the way back to the youth level. I know. I think it's the Texas Rangers team doctor and others. I mean, James Andrews has talked about this at different points, over the last 10 to 15 years, where at some point in time we've just valued velocity, spin, all of those things at such a high degree at such a young age, because you have these showcases, whether it's to be drafted, whether it's to get a scholarship somewhere, whatever it might be, that's just been the pressure, that's been the expectation. And you have these driveline type academies and training facilities and all this different stuff. The year-round baseball playing that you see amongst
Well,
youth
never
rather
leaves
than
me, but right, like because I have baseball players like Brad Pennington, Mike Bordick, or that are friends of mine in the real world. I see them on
yeah.
Facebook training kids, and Rick Dempsey, with all the work he does now, like it's all about how we can make you a ball player in November, December, January, February, and March when you're off with tackling dummies out in Owings Mills thinking about football. And people used to think about the Terps and hockey and lacrosse and soccer and MMA and anything else people get their kids into at this point. Once they're in it, I always it's become culty. Each one of
Yeah.
these sports has become very, very country club, very expensive, very niche, and very, very, very annual and very directed on mom and dad saving money with college and getting, Lulu or Chip into their school of choice, and they're going to become a doctor or a soccer player or whatever it's going to be. It's we're asking a lot of kids, man. And like, if
Yeah.
I were taking phone calls all day and playing Phil Donahue or Oprah here, or, on the radio and saying, tell me about your kid's experience. Anybody out there who's had a kid, and my kid wasn't that kid. You played a lot more sports. I was a different era. I actually have little league pictures in 5 different uniforms in different sports because I played different sports and rec ball and like all of that stuff. And my parents didn't drive. So like playing travel wasn't like something I
Right.
was even that would have eliminated me from being able to play, right? Like at any sort of level, your parents have to spend money to get you into whatever the camp is, and then there's the pay to play and soccer leagues. I've talked to Carl Delmont is involved in youth soccer here, and none of that is go play baseball for 4 months and play some soccer. And I would just think for any kid's arm, if that's what you're doing, pitching and doing that
Yeah.
9 months a year, major leaguers don't do that.
Well, and that's where I mean we're talking, this started talking about John Means and Tyler Wells, but what we're talking about right here is that's at the youth level. That we're talking about pre-high school kids even getting Tommy John surgery. So how do you quote fix a problem that begins at that level? So that's where this is so troubling, I think, for the sport in general. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that I have the solution for it, Nestor. I don't think anyone does, right? I think there are certain best practices out there, but Michael Elias even alluded to this. I still think so much of it, for as much as there's technology and you have the high definition cameras and you can track movement and release point, all the different things, right? Spin, velocity, all those different things. There's still way more art than science when it comes to trying to take care of pitchers in terms of pitch counts. Pitch counts have been a thing for 40 plus years now, as far as really being mainstream, talking about a pitcher's pitch count. Back in the 60s and 70s, someone might, I'm sure people were keeping track of it, but it was just, it was a byproduct, right? It was just,
I
it was
remember
a blip on
Schilling
the
through
radar.
140 some pitches one
Yeah,
night 20 years ago.
but
And
the
it was like,
90s,
I mean, he was trying to like complete a game because that's who he was. And,
yeah.
he had very much that old mindset about all that. I keep thinking about Jack Morris coming out of a game in the 7th inning, like, throwing a no hitter. Like I grew up with that, and that's just not the level of expectation for Kyle Bradish, or who,
Well,
like to our point, this is the last. You don't want the next press conference to be that. Period.
right. But what you just said when you mentioned Jack Morris or Kurt Schilling, or go back to Jim Palmer, or go back whatever era you
Pick
want.
any man's man,
My
Don
goodness,
Drysdale.
you could go back to the 1890s and pitchers were starting every other day at that point in time. I mean, it's a different sport, but the
Bob
difference
Gibson would hit you in the head, then hit a grand slam.
with those individuals that you mentioned, they were not throwing max effort for every single pitch through the 5th inning or the 6th inning or the 7th inning when they say, okay, you're done. We're going to go bring in our other 3, 4, 5 relievers behind you, and they're going to do the same thing. So it's just it's a different sport in that way. And when I say different, that doesn't mean I'm saying better. I think aesthetically it's not as good. Yeah, the flamethrowers and the spin and the crazy break on the ball and all of that. I mean, there's a fascination with that, and we've talked about it. A big part of our conversation with the walk conversation when you and Fadley's was about what I said how the offense is down. So it works from a result game to game result standpoint, but in terms of longevity, in terms of keeping pitchers healthy, it's really tough. But where do you fix this? Because you're talking about, like I said, 12, 13, 14-year-olds who want to be good enough to be on their high school team. Their high school team, they want to be good enough to either be drafted or get a scholarship of some major D1 program. And if you're pitching in college, you want to make it to the majors. So it's easy to say, okay, well, they need to use they can't be using max effort every single pitch, every single start. Well, that's getting results. It's working. It's successful in terms of the game itself. So they're getting to that point. They're having success with it, but they also know that approach, it leads to this high injury rate. So it's very difficult. There isn't just an easy, oh, the shift, it's ruining the game. Well, we're going to limit that. Or, oh, the games are too long. Oh, we're going to throw a pitch timer in there. There is not an easy fix like that. I'm not saying it can't be fixed at all, but boy, you're talking about fundamental changes that need to happen. And again, I don't really know where they are because the whole culture of it is there's a lot of money to be made. When you're talking about these off-season training facilities and all of that, I mean, you see it with major leaguers on down. Guys go and work with, and Driveline's just one example that has gained acclaim because major league pitchers have worked there and everything. But there are 100 Drivelines out there in terms of, oh, we'll tweak your mechanics and we'll have you spin the ball this way, and you're going to add 2 or 3 miles per hour to your fastball. Point is, your UCL is still a ligament, and there's only so much you can do. I mean, you can strengthen the muscles and all that, but a ligament, it's not like you can train a ligament that it becomes stronger in the way that you do bicep curls and your biceps get bigger. So it's fragile, and it's something that, frankly, the human arm, you can find pitchers 50 or 60 years ago telling you that the human arm wasn't intended to do what they did 50 years ago, let alone now where you're throwing as hard as you can and spinning the ball as much as you can.
That's why Eddie Feiner played softball, and Jenny Finch too.
But this is why it's, it's tough. It's a tough conversation, and it's something that is not trending in a way, but because, and I've made this point already at different times, but when guys would have Tommy John surgery, there was at least at that point a general expectation that, okay, going to have TJ, it's going to be a year to 16 months, but once you rehab, assuming the surgery was done correctly and your rehab goes smoothly, there was generally an expectation that you're going to be okay then, right? You'll be good to go. Well, now we're seeing guys. I mean, Tyler Wells had Tommy John surgery 5 years ago. When that's why he was a Rule 5 pick a year and a half later, and the Orioles got him. John Means is 25 months removed from Tommy John surgery. Now, sometimes and I think in John Means' case, I'm not accusing the doctor because there's also life, right? And a doctor can do everything well and your body just doesn't respond well. So it's not like a malpractice accusation, but sometimes, and this is why I said, you don't just cut on a pitcher the first moment you hear UCL, because you have a situation like John Means where it's not a smooth return. And sometimes you have to get another surgery, but you're seeing more and more guys. Spencer Strider's an example of this, with the Braves, where, Ohtani had Tommy John surgery and then had to get another UCL surgery last year. So, you're only seeing now 4, 5, 6 years where them pitchers are having another issue with their UCL. I mean, that's where things become really alarming because, it's one thing to have Tommy John surgery once, and the data as of a few years ago was that I think at one point in time, and it's probably higher now. And in fact, I'd bet a lot of money it's higher now. But as of a few years ago, I think it was roughly a third of the pitchers that were active in Major League Baseball had had Tommy John surgery at some point. And that number's only going up. So, you know, when is enough in terms of how we're going to curtail this? I think the next frontier for pitching and for success, and look, this is across sports really, but I think it's really more on the sports science and health front of, is there something that we're missing? Is there some kind of tracking? Is there something here that can curtail this? But I'm not so sure, because this is all about max effort, max velocity, and max spin, and max horizontal and vertical break on the ball. And that's why I said pitchers are, from a pure talent standpoint, not longevity, not complete games or anything like that, but from a pure talent standpoint, the game has never been better in terms of guys throwing hard and having wicked break on the ball and all that. But they've never been breaking at this same high rate. So that was a long-winded answer to tell you I don't know what the solution is, Nestor, but this is not tenable in the sense of not, and I'm not speaking specifically on the Orioles, just in general, that we're seeing so many pitchers just not be able to stay healthy for more than a handful of years.
Well,
at
we
a time.
got 3 down, right? 3 guys down, Bautista and now these 2, and Bradish was meandering at
And we'll
one
see.
point.
Yeah.
And Kramer's hurt. So, I mean, all of a sudden, you look at what happened to Tampa last year, or you look into what happens that could decimate and really F up the Orioles' efforts here. And then you start to think, if John Angelo still own the team, not just ran it, because his people are still running the team. But if John Angelos were still here, would that Corbin Burns thing have even happened? You know what I mean? Like, for real. And you think about, well, they'd really be in trouble. They would look like Tampa did last year. Talk about great starts and how great New York's playing. Tampa was that team last year. Look, let's take a break. Luke and I don't know how we meandered into this, but we started talking about arms, and like, we can talk about, when we're going to talk about this rotation, it's all we're going to talk about. But you and I hadn't given any oxygen to the Tommy John thing, so I'm glad we did that. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake to a bunch of places. We're at Cooper's North on Tuesday of this week, promoting next Friday, where Fleet Week will be taking over when the Phillies come to town. And talk about the Phillies, right? I mean, like, good baseball teams. This is a big month of baseball around here, so we're looking forward to it. Starting in Toronto this week and Tampa this weekend. Thursday morning, we're going to be at State Fair in Catonsville before the Orioles take on the Blue Jays in the wrap of that 4-game series. And then next 2 weeks after that, the 20th will be before the Orioles Yankees game at Costas. We're going to be at Pappas on the 25th and at Coco's next week on Wednesday afternoon with Marcella. And I got a lot of friends stopping by for that one. Everybody loves Coco's, so and it's in Lauraville. Nice little lunchtime thing going on. Also, the Orioles playing a lunchtime game against the Braves. I might be going to that game. So, big couple of weeks here. Lots going on the field. Lots going on with offense. Another grand slam. John Martin had to run out and find $5,000 to pay that for home run riches. So we got things going on around here. We'll be eating crab cakes. I'll be drinking beer. This is the first segment I've done since my wife broke her foot. I don't even know what to say she broke. She broke her fibula. So it's sort of like her ankle, her foot, it was at the bottom. She's in a cast. It sucks. So a long summer around here. So big appreciation. Everybody sent a get well to my wife. She is resting comfortably and trying to get more comfortable. So I'll bring her home crab cakes. We have great sponsors around here. It'll make her feel better. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Lots of baseball, a little bit of football, and a whole bunch of lots of other stuff. We're BaltimorePositive.com. Stay with us.